From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and here's what's ahead. K-State's Glynn Tonsor is standing by for this week's cattle market segment. He'll comment on the just-announced new trade deal between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, what that means to the cattle sector. And Glynn offers his latest numbers on making decisions on the 2018 calf crop. Then Jeff Wickman visits with K-State's Ignacio Ciampitti about the causes behind late-season purpling of corn and grain sorghum in western Kansas, what that means to the productivity of those respective feed grains. Jeff also has this week's 4-H segment. He'll visit with K-State's Beth Hinshaw later on, previewing the 2018 Kansas Youth Leadership Forum. All this and more right here on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome once again to another Agriculture Today here on the K-State Radio Network. Glad to have you along. The cattle market scene is our first order of business as we visit once again with livestock economist Glynn Tonsor, K-State Research and Extension, and rather late-breaking developments that we'll get into, Glynn, on what used to be called NAFTA. More on that in a moment, what it means to the livestock sector, particularly the cattle market. The trade last week, if you look at the cash-fed cattle market, pretty uneventful, to put it that way.
Yeah, when you look at the week as a whole, we're pretty much flat across the board. Before I break down the numbers, we started the week off, I would say, the bearish tone, following up on the cattle on feed report. So we had a heavy number of placements that put some downward pressure on prices early in the week. But as the week went on, the tone from a positive demand perspective, maybe the heavy wall of cattle behind us, all that kind of stuff was supportive. So on net, I would just call the week kind of flat, and that'll show up in the numbers I'm going to quote for us here. The October live cattle contract, we closed the week at 113.5. That was up about 50 cents for the week. When we look over at cash trade, it was 110 and flat for the week. So, basis itself has narrowed some there, and there wasn't much action in the live cattle market last week. We move over to feeder cattle. The nearby October contract, 158 and change, again, was about flat for the week. We look over to cash trade, USDA AMS, they call it flat to a little bit lower, depending on what market I would coach you around the country. The Wednesday Dodge City report was steady to $3 lower, is how the USDA called that. And just 2 example lots to give our listeners some context. There was a small lot at 526 pounds that sold for $185. Keep that number in mind when I share a projection in a minute. And then there was a heavier lot, 775 pounders, that traded at $160. So prices are still elevated compared to what we thought they'd be 6 months ago. But on balance, the market was, I'm just going to call it flat for the week.
And how did the retail demand go?
Yeah, so wholesale cutouts, they came in down a little bit more than $1. So choice cutout was $203, almost $204 on Friday's close, and select was about $193.5. Both of those were $1, a little bit more than $1 in the case of select off. So on balance, I think it's just important to remind us sometimes having a non-event week is okay. We had the big, what you might deem as a big news bearish way on cattle feed-on report, and other fundamentals kind of picked up the slack, if you like, as the week went on. And if on balance you can absorb a bearish news and offset it before the week's over and the net effect is flat, that's a good thing for the cattle complex.
Absolutely. Well, right to it, the newsmaker of the day here, again announced late last evening, the U.S., Mexico, and Canada have settled on the new NAFTA, if you will. It'll be under a different nomenclature, the U.S., Mexico, Canada Trade Agreement. Of course, we want to look into what this means for the cattle sector, but what are the broad points there that have led to this agreement?
Yeah, so I mean, the first point of disclosure would be a lot of the details are yet to be flushed out. So in preparation for this and other discussions I'm having in email and so forth, I've read what the press is putting out. Mm-hmm. So my comments are going to be there. And the reason I highlight that is some of this is yet to be determined. As I understand it, Congress won't even vote on this until 2019. So I don't want to introduce political uncertainty on it, but none of this is done until everybody truly votes and approves. Now, that being said, what I've read and what I currently understand to be the case is the agreement between those three countries will keep, on balance, a lack of tariffs, basically, quote-unquote, a free trade environment where if the previous NAFTA kind of fell through, we were set up to likely have more tariffs, which would have restricted movement of products, and in this case, live animals, which we'll talk about in a minute, across the border. So big picture, my understanding is we're avoiding introduction of a lot of tariffs, and that would be the big picture win if you're just making a broad statement about, folks like me that believe free trade rises the tide for everybody involved. That would be a good thing. Particularly Canada and the U.S., there's a lot of discussion about dairy access or access of the U.S. dairy farmer into the Canadian dairy market. To be
that was
precise.
Actually a big sticking point, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I was not at the negotiating table, but all the press, suggested that was one of the more hard lines to deal with. And what's being reported in the press was up to 3.5% of the Canadian market will be accessible to U.S. dairy farmers. So that would be an improvement compared on the past. I'm sure Canadian dairy farmers don't like that component, and U.S. dairy farmers will like it. I don't consider myself a dairy economist, but I will interject here. The 3.5% is not a big number of access. It is access that wasn't there before, so there's probably going to be some political spin on if that's a big deal or not. But it is one of the few things that is specific to meat and livestock that's being reported to this point. That's the reason I highlight it. The full scope of these changes, as I've tried to lay out here, I don't think we know yet, and we won't know for a few more weeks until it gets flushed out. Importantly, I've not seen anything that is specific to bovine, beef, hogs, pork that came up in the news the last couple of days. And, that just leaves me speculating that they were not massively changed from the past NAFTA agreement. So that would be my best guess at the moment. And I highlight that because even if that is the case, that would be a good thing on balance, in my opinion, because Canada, U.S., and Mexico have very intertwined supply chains. We could pick any of those species and industries, and we'll just do beef and cattle here for a moment, there are live cattle that cross the U.S. and Canadian border frequently. There are feeder cattle that cross the U.S., Canadian, and the Mexican-U.S. border frequently, and there's a lot of core economic reasons for that. I won't belabor that here, but those supply chains are connected. Likewise, when you look at live hogs, there's a large number of hogs at different ages and sizes that cross the Canadian and U.S. border for a reason. And if we're not directly influencing that, I think that's a good thing. Packing plants reside in different parts of our continent for a reason that's reflecting that. Feed grain bases and so forth being sprinkled around the continent, not just states and so forth, is a big reason for that. On balance, I think the comparative advantage of the three countries when it comes to ultimately meat production can be kind of retained if we keep quote-unquote free trade, and at face value, it appears at least, and I'm referring specifically to the beef cattle and the hog swine market, not going to be drastically impacted compared to what the old NAFTA was. Right. So there's been lots of trade uncertainty. This is not done by any means, but it is a step, in my eyes, in the right direction of resolving some of that trade uncertainty.
Well, lifting that uncertainty is the huge news. For comparison purposes and to further illustrate, you do have the numbers from 2017 on beef, pork, and broiler trade with the three countries, which drive home how important this is.
Yeah, it does, and it understates it, and I'll try to highlight that point. So, yes, I just use 2017 because it's a full calendar year. U.S. beef exports to Mexico were 15% of our total exports, and to Canada was 11%. On the pork side, almost a third of the pork we export goes to Mexico in 2017 in particular. And then Canada is about 9% of the total U.S. exports for pork went there. And on the broiler side, exports from the U.S. to Mexico were about 19% of total volume, and Canada was about 5%. So it's well over a fourth of volume. And as I alluded, at times it's been over half the volume, depending on what else is going on in the world. So that just tells you the integration on the U.S. meat export side. That's to say nothing of the dependence of Canadian and Mexico flow the other way. It's to say nothing about the live animal trade, which I tried to allude to in a broad sense earlier. These are specifically just the U.S. meat exports, right? So that's one component of the much broader set of connections in the livestock meat sector here in North America. And hopefully everybody recognizes these are valuable products. And if you have that portion of your industry that is historically tied to those countries, it's a big deal. Right. So that is a good thing.
Again, the agreement not to the finish line yet, but it's well down the home stretch with the new United States-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement, or USMCA, as it will be now known.
I will interject is I anticipate there's going to be clarification on this, and there needs to be clarification to know the terms, but it will also pivot us more towards trade uncertainty resolution with other countries. I think most of our listeners know a heavy portion of the growth in where we export meat products, and I'll just talk beef in particular for a moment, are various Asian countries. And there are some good signs that, now we're talking with Korea and Japan in a new way and renewed deals there and so forth, which is good. I think everybody knows about the discussion with China and kind of where they're at. But I envision a pivot, in the event we're able to clarify the terms of USMCA, the new agreement, which it'll take me a while to get used to saying that. But I do think we're going to have a pivot to watching the Asian countries, and that's going to be important because that's the main source of remaining trade uncertainty. And I look forward to some clarifications occurring there as well.
Quick look at the beef basis projections for the 2018 calf crop that you have put together. You update us on this regularly. What are the numbers telling now?
Yeah, so remember I quoted, this past week Dodge City a 181 calf price. So basically if you look 2 weeks out, it's not going to be surprising. We're currently projecting a 181 calf price for the middle of October if you were to sell a calf 5.5 weight in Salina. Real quickly, if you're a cow-calf producer that regularly sells at that point, let's say you can run a cow for $850 cash cost. That equates to a $145 return over your cash cost, which would be a good year. It's not as good as 2014 by any means, but it's way above the normal year. So this year has set up to be a pretty good year for a quote-unquote average cost producer. I also highlight this because there's several people, and a lot of the source of demand for calves is because people are interested in either retaining their own or buying somebody else's, plans to put them out on wheat and those kind of things. So what if you were to withhold that animal and sell it in January, is one of the numbers I brought to us here today, sell it in the middle of January at 750 pounds, then actually at the moment a projected sale price of $158 is what we're looking at for the middle of January. That corresponds with a value of gain that's $96 per hundredweight, which is quite high compared to cost of gain, where a lot of folks are going to be in the, I'll say, $40 to $60 range, depending on your exact situation. So I highlight that for two reasons. One is keep the beefbasis.com tool in mind when you're coming up with these projections. You can do this on your own. But the other one would be as you're trying to understand why calf prices have ongoing support. It's in large part because there's a lot of optimism that putting the next 100 to 300 pounds on before we get to the feed yard is going to have lower cost than maybe in the past, and that translates into higher willingness to pay for calf prices.
Beefbasis.com if you want to put your own numbers to that decision on retaining or feeding those calves on out. Glynn, thanks for the update.
Thanks, Eric.
Glynn Tonsor with comments on the cattle markets. He's a livestock economist, K-State Research and Extension. You're tuned to Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
You're listening to Agriculture Today. Some Kansas farmers are experiencing purpling of corn and sorghum. However, while he encourages producers to be checking their fields, K-State crop production and cropping system specialist Ignacio Ciampitti says there's no reason to be concerned. Ignacio, weather conditions in western Kansas bringing on some late-season purpling on corn and sorghum.
Yes. If you look at the weather conditions, that we have, I would say in the last few months, even if you look at the conditions from planting for corn and sorghum in western Kansas, this year we have excellent conditions and primarily on precipitation in terms of, we are in so many environments above normal precipitation. And then specifically when the weather conditions are turned to be favorable at the end of the season, we have seen situations that resulted in the appearance of purple colorations in corn plants and also on sorghum plants. In corn, many times this purpling will appear on the base of the stem, close to the ground. Also, if the purpling is moving forward, sometimes you might see that color even sometimes on close to the ears, even on the husk. The leaves that are surrounding the ear, basically, they also might turn purple. This is it's basically a symptom that is showing us that there is an imbalance between how much the plant is fixing carbon and accumulating sugars, and how much those sugars are moving to grains, or, for example, in sorghum is to the head, or in corn to the ear. So this situation is nothing to be alarmed. It's just basically telling us that the plant is working under really good optimal conditions. The plant is basically, fixing that carbon, and many times what happens is there is no space, no really flow of where to go, because we might be restricted on the size of number of kernels, number of grains. So it's basically showing us that there is some kind of an imbalance in the plant. In many situations, this could be happening for a couple of reasons. One is there is some environment by genotype interactions. So when you have a very good environment, as we discussed before, the plant will be basically continue to work at optimal conditions. The problem that will happen is specifically is that the plant at some point is accumulating this carbon. The carbon is, rather than just to move into the ears or to the reproductive organs, doesn't find space because there is a limitation on that size. We say there is a limitation on the sink. And then the plant continue to basically move in that carbon. And at some point, when there is no more space where to allocate the carbon, the plant start accumulating those sugars. And the accumulation of that sugar is being expressed by the production and accumulation of this pigment that is called anthocyanin. And then the pigment is a pigment that basically produces in many situations more kind of a red, blue, purple. In many situations we see it just immediately as a purpling. And that's what we have seen in many of our environments on the western side of the state for corn and sorghum.
It's not going to at all affect the yield or anything?
No, our experience in terms of, effects on yields are basically not really any effect. This, again, in many situations is just telling us that there is an imbalance. And then a few examples where we might see this purpling is also if someone was going throughout the field in corn and removing the ears. When you remove the ears, you are leaving the plant with no really any organ to where to send the sugars. So you will see that in some of the plants you can play with that and try if you want. Make sure that no one sees you. If you remove a few ears, if you come up after a week, you will start seeing that purple coloration and accumulating on the base of the stem and then moving towards close to where the ear was placed. One of the things I would like to emphasize is in some situations, for example, the purple coloration is also connected to other reasons. Early in the season, it could be, for example, for a phosphorus deficiency. So if you don't have enough phosphorus in the soil early in the season, that lack of nutrient, basically, it will give to the plant that purple coloration. In corn also, there is a situation that it happened early in the season that it could be connected to cold temperature. When the temperatures are really cold, there are a few corn hybrids that they can also produce that purple coloration as a sign of stress. Again, when you are looking at late season purpling, make sure that you take a look to that purpling, because in many situations it might be only just telling us that there is an imbalance, that sugar buildup could be in some situations a reflection of something happened, maybe heat, maybe insects, maybe disease affecting your reproductive sink. And then because of that effect, now even when you are in excellent growing conditions, you have limited amount of where to place that sugar. And that's kind of one of the main things that we're trying to emphasize. If you want to diagnose, for example, on sorghum, we say if you want to take a look to the purple coloration and make sure there is nothing else, that is not connected to any other disease, you can just go to the sorghum, take a look to the stem on the base section and split the stem. And then if you split the stem in half and if you see basically that there is no damage, there is no discoloration, that basically everything seems to be white, saying that the plant is working fine, the purpling that is around the stem is just a purpling that is connected to sugar accumulation. If there is another disease or another problem, you will be finding when you split the stems discoloration or problems that are connected to the disease. The question that you ask is a fair question. Many times we have this question from farmers, will the purpling reduce the yields? Based on our experiences, not directly. We are not finding that the purpling is negatively impacting yields. Again, what we are saying is, and in some situations, the purpling is a reflection that something impacted the reproductive sink.
Is this gradual or is this something that comes on quickly?
It comes so quite quickly, and sometimes it's just a reflection of imbalance. So let's say that we were planting sorghum, and then we went through flowering, and flowering was placed in early August. If you went through that condition with high temperature, if that sorghum was basically losing some of the top section for abortion or for lack of pollination, you will be ending with a size of a head that will be smaller. And technically, rather than just to have 3,000 grains, you might finish with 1,500, half. So even if conditions are improving after, and the plant still is active and can fix and can produce sugars, the plant will continue moving that. But at some point, it will face the limitation that there is no place where to allocate that sugar. And then many times you start seeing that purpling that is really getting close to the heads. I mean, very to the peduncle and very close to the section, because reflection of saying they are trying to move sugar, and basically the impediment is you already accumulated everything that you need to be accumulating, and you are basically what you are missing is kernels. You are missing grains. You are missing basically, you have a lower reproductive zinc. For me, always an indication when you are looking at purpling is again an excuse for our farmers to stop to your fields, make sure that you scout, look at the conditions, because purpling is a reflection of biotic or abiotic, so meaning of heat, cold temperature, or drought, or even insect or disease that at some point particularly maybe damage our reproductive zinc. And then the purpling is just a reflection of showing us that basically there is an imbalance between the ability of the plant today to move that sugar and produce sugars, and basically the ability of that plant to absorb the grains, to absorb and accumulate that sugar. So just to be scouting, I think that is at this point always is excellent just to go out and make sure that we take a look to these conditions. And I think that is in many situations, more if you are looking at Western Kansas situations, these type of conditions are very evident in high elevation areas, like in Western Kansas or areas in Northwest, for example, that they were experiencing some really cool temperature. So anytime that you have like a nighttime temperatures that they were cool during the grain filling, then we start seeing this purpling that is sometimes it's showing up in a few days only.
So in terms of the condition of the crops overall, what are we seeing in Western Kansas when it comes to corn and sorghum?
Overall, I will say that we are in an excellent shape. I think that if you're looking about precipitation, we are in many areas we are above normal, specifically on the dryland conditions. I will say dryland conditions, we are seeing that, this year some of the guys that were a little bit more aggressive on taking the risk of putting a little bit more nitrogen or plant density on corn, they might see that benefit coming back. The challenge, as we all know, in dryland Western Kansas is this year, this growing season particularly, probably was 1 in 50. So it's really hard to predict the weather. And then if you were told me, before the beginning of the growing season that we were planning to have this season, some of the practices that we were doing, we could slightly change just to make sure that we were capturing all the yield. But overall, based on, some of the tours and things that I have seen in Western Kansas, I think it looks quite good.
No disease concerns at this point?
Some places, and everything is sometimes connected to high susceptibility. In corn, we are seeing in some areas some stock lodging. So that's why scouting is relevant. If you are looking at fields that are already severely damaged by disease, or, it could be like a southern rust or anything that is specifically more impacting the stem and the standability of the plant, then it's good to do the scouting to make sure that we put as a priority what are the fields that we need to make sure that we harvest first and then continue moving forward on harvesting. But overall, we are getting really quite close to harvest. In many situations, we are already harvesting around here in central, northeast, and I think overall the crop looks quite good.
That's K-State Crop Production and Cropping System Specialist Ignacio Ciampitti. For more information, go to agronomy.k-state.edu/extension. This is the K-State Radio Network.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you as we move on to today's agricultural news headlines for you now, courtesy in part of DTN. Well, the U.S. and Canada reached a deal late last night, keeping Canada as part of the new North American Free Trade Agreement, along with Mexico, which had come to terms with the U.S. last month. The trade deal keeps intact two of the three largest export markets for U.S. agricultural products. Canadian officials agreed in the new deal to provide more access to its dairy market. A report from the Toronto Star said the U.S. would be given access equal to 3.6% of the Canadian dairy market, slightly higher than the access the U.S. would have gained under the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would be 3.25% for TPP suppliers. The deal regarding dairy also requires Canada to drop its Class 7 pricing system that put U.S. dairies at a significant disadvantage selling into Canada. Now, the deal will be called the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. It was announced by the White House shortly after 10 o'clock last evening in a call with reporters after a day of negotiations. In Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called his cabinet in for a late-night meeting as well to discuss the new deal, which will replace the 25-year-old NAFTA. Leaders of the three countries will sign the agreement in November. The text of the trade deal will now be delivered to Congress before the midterm election. Congressional approval for the trade deal will come from the Congress in 2019. Among other groups, the National Pork Producers Council hailed the deal early today, stating that the ratification by Congress would be a key vote by the group to ensure that lawmakers are informed about the impacts of the trade agreement. North American trade between the three countries was valued at just under $1.2 trillion last year, though the U.S. ended up with a $71 billion trade deficit with Mexico and a $17 billion trade deficit with Canada. That's according to the U.S. Trade Representative's Office. Canadian officials maintain, however, that the U.S. has a trade surplus with that country. Canada is the largest U.S. export market for agriculture, valued at $20.5 billion in exports in 2017. Mexico is the number 3 overall U.S. market, valued at $18.6 billion last year. The markets were a little surprised by what the USDA reported in its grain stocks report last Friday. Gary Crawford has more.
A bearish surprise from the Agriculture Department Friday.
For both corn and soybeans, generally speaking, most folks seem to be anticipating lower ending stocks numbers than what was reported in the grain stocks report.
Lance Honig with the USDA Statistics Service, which reported we've got more corn and beans left over from the 2017 crop than most analysts expected. This, even though
for both corn and soybeans, those disappearance numbers are movement of grain, the largest that we've ever seen for the entire season.
Even so, for soybean stocks, we end the season with 438 million bushels, 43 million more than USDA had forecast just 2 weeks ago, and up 45% from a year ago. For corn ending stocks, a little over 2.1 billion bushels. That's down 7% from September 1st a year ago, still, though, higher than expected. So feed use may have been a little less than was projected. Market reaction to this was immediate. Price declines for corn and beans. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Also on Friday, the USDA issued its 2018 Kansas small grain acreage and production summary report. The Kansas winter wheat crop for 2018 now finally estimated at 277 million bushels, down 17% from last year. The acreage harvested for grain at 7.3 million acres. That was up 5% from 2017. And the official final yield at 38 bushels per acre, down 10 bushels from 2017. You're listening to Agriculture Today, and we're around now to time for this week's edition of Tree Tales from the Kansas Forest Service here at Kansas State University.
This is Jaron Tyndall for the Kansas Forest Service with Part 3 of a Tree Tales series on stream processes and management. Today's topic is stream bank instability. Unstable stream banks can often be characterized by nearly vertical banks, large areas of exposed roots, lack of vegetation, vegetated clumps in the channel, slumps, and stream bank cracking. Understanding why a stream bank is unstable is the first step in developing a management strategy. In some situations, the channel bed is unstable and actively downcutting. As the bed drops, the relative height of the stream banks increase, eventually causing them to become unstable. Nick points in the stream channel and vertical banks on both sides of the channel are indicators of an unstable bed. Stream bank instability may also be caused by local flow obstructions. Fallen trees, log jams, or mid-channel bars may cause currents to scour into stream banks. Culverts, bridges, and other structures may also cause local scour. Runoff from adjacent land can concentrate and create gullies on the stream bank. Vegetation removal and overgrazing can also be the cause of bank erosion. Hydraulic stream bank failures occur when the energy of flowing water exceeds the resistance of bank materials. The rate of erosion depends on the cohesiveness of the soil, the size of the soil particles, and the amount and type of vegetation present on the bank. It also depends on the quantity of flowing water and the amount of sediment load in the water. Removing stream bank vegetation, straightening or widening a channel, or a change in sediment input can result in severe hydraulic stream bank erosion. Geotechnical stream bank failures can occur that are unrelated to hydraulic failures. Generally, these types of failures are a result of soil moisture conditions and uneven distribution of weight in the bank. Bank failures typically occur when soil is removed from the bottom of the bank or if weight is added to the top of the bank. Fine-grained soils can become saturated when inundated by floodwater. The heavier saturated soil, combined with a rapid drawdown in the water level, can cause bank failure. Ground moisture fluctuations between wet and dry periods can cause tension cracks along the stream bank, and in a similar fashion, freezing and thawing cycles can fracture the soil and contribute to bank failures. Stream bank erosion is a natural process and is just one part of a complex system of stream processes. But when a disturbance occurs, the stream system may be pushed into a long period of instability. These adjustments can change the width and depth of the channel, which in turn affects the stability of the stream banks. Given enough time, streams will naturally re-establish a stable form, but the process of doing so usually entails a long period of severe erosion and water quality degradation. If you have stream erosion issues on your land and would like to know what can feasibly be done about it, I encourage you to give me a call. Also, mark your calendars for a free educational workshop to be held on January 15th in Seneca, Kansas, where you can learn more about stream management and connect with professionals in this field. To register, please visit the Delaware River Raps website. This has been Jaron Tyndall with the Kansas Forest Service, and you've been listening to another Tree Tale.
Many thanks, Jaron. Once more, to listen to Agriculture Today anytime you choose, visit agtoday.net. You can listen on demand and find links to subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and Spotify. Start by going to agtoday.net. This is the K-State Radio Network. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today 800-321-3276 or visit us online, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions.
This is Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. Aloha Leadership is the theme for this year's Kansas Youth Leadership Forum. Here to preview the forum is Southeast Area 4-H Specialist Beth Hinshaw. Beth, the 2018 Kansas Youth Leadership Forum is coming up in November at Rock Springs 4-H Center, and this is actually quite a production. There is a lot going on here. I was looking through all of the speakers and all of the workshops, all the activities. This is definitely hands-on learning.
Oh, most definitely. And the Leadership Forum and the Volunteer Forum are a part of one total event that we call Kansas 4-H Leadership Weekend. And so the Youth Leadership Forum part is put together by the Kansas 4-H Youth Leadership Council, and it's just a great time of speakers. We also have workshops, and then they'll have opportunities to meet in small groups and get acquainted and do activities that way as well.
Let's talk about some of those workshops and activities, because this is kind of, I would say, what I would consider to be what people need to know about leadership. You're talking about good time management skills, opportunity to grow their public speaking skills.
Yeah, we are really pleased with the workshops that we have. We always, send information out and see who is interested in coming and offering a workshop for us, and we really do have some great workshops. And while the young people are at the Youth Leadership Forum, they'll be able to attend 3 different workshops. And you're right with some of those topics. We also have some topics on the possibilities of international 4-H exchange, making the right fit, and how to, what you need to do with your college search process. We have one on first impressions that I think will be really good as well. KAPs is something that our young people are interested in. That's our Kansas Award portfolio. We have several that are also involve ag subject matter and ag knowledge. And we also have one on personality and just finding different ways to use your leadership skills. We also have our speaker, who is Kent Julian, and Kent will, in addition to be doing the keynote address and the cap note address, he's also going to offer 2 workshops while he's at the Youth Leadership Forum as well.
His kind of centers on your personality and superheroes?
Yes, that's what his is, and he has a great message. We're just thrilled that we were able to get him back this year. We had him several years ago, and the kids just really enjoyed him, as did the volunteers. So we feel very fortunate to have him coming back to Kansas.
This is really something that the people who are interested in attending should start looking at now on the website, because there are a number of different workshops, and like you say, they do have to make some decisions on which ones to attend.
Definitely, and they fill up. So, there's a certain number of chairs in each one of those. So if you want your best option, you want to sign up soon. The other thing about registering early is we have an early bird fee for both events if you register by October the 15th. And then if you choose to wait a little bit longer, it'll cost just a little bit more. So we always like to encourage people to go ahead and register. That final deadline is November the 1st.
And if they are coming from a distance, they have the opportunity to spend the night before.
Yes, something different with the Kansas Leadership Weekend that we're doing this year is we are really focusing on Saturday and Sunday. But we do know that we have some young people and volunteers who need to come from a distance, and so there is an option to come into Rock Springs the night before, have lodging overnight, and breakfast the next morning to be ready to start the day.
The age range on this is 14 to 18, and that is, I guess there's a few exceptions there.
The volunteers is anybody who would be considered an adult volunteer, and so, certainly any volunteers are welcome. The young people need to be 14 to 18 by January 1 of 2019. So our new 4-H year starts on October the 1st, and so that's why we go with that January 1 deadline.
And these do not have to be 4-H members.
No, they do not. And we welcome 4-H members to bring non-4-H friends along. We think it's a really great opportunity to come and learn some leadership skills and really get an idea of the kinds of things that you can do and learn in the Kansas 4-H program.
And an opportunity to experience Rock Springs in more of the late fall, early winter.
Yes, and that's what we always tell people is, we love going to Rock Springs for camp in the summertime, but it's just kind of a magical place, I think, in the fall and the winter with the leaves, and you get such a different perspective of the whole facility when the leaves aren't on the trees as well.
And that being said, they need to think about fall clothing and not their normal summer clothing.
Yes, most definitely. It's typically a little cooler while we are there, and so we do like everybody to, it's that time of year where you have to start thinking about layers.
And is there also an election that takes place here as well?
Yes, that's another important part of the Youth Leadership Forum is we will be electing our 2019 Kansas 4-H Youth Leadership Council. So that's an important thing that all the young people who are there will be taking part in caucusing with their county or district and then voting on candidates.
As you mentioned, there is a fee associated with this. Is this something that the kids can fundraise for, or do their clubs help out in any way?
It happens all kinds of ways, and most definitely. We have a lot of local 4-H foundations who have scholarships available for young people to attend out-of-county or out-of-district activities. A number of clubs will give scholarships as well, and then we also have county 4-H councils or district 4-H councils that do as well. So it's kind of different, everywhere, but I think it's always a good idea to just ask what is available. And we know that there's some really wonderful local service clubs that like to see young people getting leadership training as well, and so they might be able to be tapped for some kind of scholarship too.
And this special weekend is on the website. They can go there and they can do the registration process online.
Yes, most definitely. Everything is online. Our weekend is in November. It's always the weekend before Thanksgiving. And so this year, it is the 17th and 18th of November. And like we said, if people need to come in earlier, they can come in on the evening of the 16th.
And again, the website?
kansas4h.org. And if you look under What's Hot, you'll see a link to both the Kansas Youth Leadership Forum and the Kansas Volunteer Forum. The other option is we have a button on the left-hand side that says Register for 4-H Events Here, and that's where you would click to find the Leadership Weekend registration link.
That's Southeast Area 4-H Specialist Beth Hinshaw. Again, for more information, go to kansas4h.org and look under What's Hot. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.